Trish L. Gleason, Assistant City Clerk, you are hereby directed to call a special session of the City Council to be held on Monday, July 15th, 2024 at 5:30 p.m. in the Historic Federal Building for the purpose of conducting a work session on the Chaplain Schmitt Island Redevelopment Plan Review.
Good evening and welcome to a special session of the Dubuque City Council for July 15th, 2024. As a reminder to viewers and listeners, due to the nature of tonight's meeting topic, public input is not accepted. However, you may contact the City Council directly from the city's webpage at www.cityofdubuque.org/council contacts. Attendance at this session is as follows. Mayor Kavanaugh.
Here.
Council members Farber.
Here.
Jones.
Here.
Resnick.
Here.
Roussel.
Here.
Sprank.
Here.
Wethel.
Here.
City Manager Van Milligan. City Attorney Brumwell.
Here.
I'll now turn it over to Economic Development Director Jill Connors.
Good evening, Jill Connors, Economic Development Director. We are here tonight to talk about the Chaplain Schmitt Master Plan. Just to give you a little bit of history on the planning on the island, there was a 2014 master plan that got adopted, and that set out the key desires for creation of a destination area. In 2017, there was a placemaking plan that was put together, and that was clarified and updated in 2022 in order to include the amphitheater and an improved trail system. In 2024 then, now we've put together a development plan to clarify goals, identify potential costs and impacts of what is feasible given the disruptions over the past several years, including COVID, interest rates, et cetera. We've been meeting weekly for about a year and a half, and we're here in front of you earlier this year in February. Today's a progress report of our continued work to refine the development plans based on this work, and I'm going to hand it off to Marie Ware to speak on council goals and priorities and the investments to date.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Marie Ware, Leisure Services Director. I'm excited to be able to talk to you today. My portion of the presentation is just a very quick overview of the last year. So your City Council goals and priorities. Currently on this year, we have the RAISE grant and matching funds for construction was a high priority. We also have had Chaplain Schmitt Island as a key priority for several years. And as you're aware, that's where staff puts a tremendous amount of time and effort, as well as building partnerships to be able to make that happen. What you'll see as I go through this very quickly is one of our key things we talk about is people, planning, and partnerships. That's exactly what you'll hear this evening. And those partnerships, the city, DRA, Schmitt Island Development, private, it all comes together as we talk about the things we'll talk about and the momentum that we're building. So our capital projects that we've been working on or through or in some way as an entire city, so this is many different departments that are involved in this. As you know, the RAISE planning grant, and then we were awarded the implementation grant. We were awarded the amphitheater grant that we're working on currently. Schmitt Island Connector Trail, that's the one that starts at 16th and goes to the Veterans Memorial that's in construction right now. Sanitary sewer improvements for the island, connectivity for fiber on the island, the maintenance dredging that goes along with the Piasta Channel, as well as looking at the parking needs as a part of a multimodal plan. The Imon Arena we've talked to you about, being able to move forward with settlement remediation, and that is complete dehumidification and HVAC improvements, which are currently in process. The arena naming and the sponsorship, which made for new signage and new banners, really upgrading the look of the facility. Concession stand improvements are being currently worked on right now. A new video board was a partnership, new sound system, which is key to facility. But another really important thing is just the activation of the island, things going on there in addition to the actual facilities doing activities. Last year was an autumn adventures afternoon. In the fall, it was a gorgeous day. The Memorial Day parade, the Veterans Memorial ceremony, the remembrance ceremony that's held, You just saw probably in the newspaper over the 4th of July, the Golden Knights jumped onto Chaplain Schmitt Island. Days of Caring, where Q and Diamond Joe came out with their employees and did a cleanup around the island, and a focus from the congressional staff visit. The Imon Arena also has its own activation where University of Dubuque added a men's and women's hockey program, which is a whole nother element to the actual arena itself. Skating for All vouchers that we've talked about with you, where we have provided funding so that schools can be able to come and rent the facility and or get skate rental for free, making sure that it's available to many, many children throughout the area. Special Olympics holds an event. There was an Easter skate with Santa. So as you see, much activity has really gone into it. And so the last piece of this is the establishment of Schmitt Island Development Corporation, or what we commonly call SID. SID is responsible for overseeing the spending of the 1/3 DRA distribution. You approved as a part of changing the lease for 1/3 of the money to be invested back into the island. It also became a 501c3, so it can facilitate charitable giving for the implementation of the master plans that we already have on file, as well as this development plan that we're talking about now. And then SID is also in charge of the long-term arena management agreement. So many, many things have really happened throughout the last year to move things forward. So with that, I'm going to allow ask Alex Dixon to be able to come up and share a little bit of a preview of the momentum that we're building and why we're doing that.
Thank you, Marie. Alex Dixon, President and CEO of Q Casino Resort and DRA. It's always a pleasure to be back with you all. Exciting to hear about all the developments. I think everyone here, as well as in the community, should be really proud of the wins and the points we're putting up on the board. Literally on that page, you can see literally millions of dollars coming from whether it be the federal government or us reinvesting in ourselves to be moving forward. So excited to be a part of it, and really I want to thank and acknowledge the team behind us, everyone who mostly are city staff that we've worked with to help develop all of the concepts that you're seeing here. And so very appreciative of them as well as our consultants. But I think it's important to root the conversation in the broader economy as well as just the economics whenever you're talking about development. And this is, we're being presented by Jill Connors, the Economic Development Director. And so if we take a step back, really what we're talking about broadly is what's called the fun economy. My good friend Dr. Bo Bernhard in UNLV really coined this well, where you take the tourism globally, sports and entertainment globally. If you combine all those, it's about $13.7 trillion in economic activity globally if you take up the fun economy. To put that in perspective, that is bigger than the global construction, bigger than agriculture, bigger than auto manufacturing, apparel, pharmaceutical. And if you think about it, if you think in your own personal finances, after you pay for your mortgage or your housing expense, oftentimes your fun expense is one of the largest things you do, whether that be your annual vacation, if you're a member of a country club, if you like to go to the casino, if you like to go and do any number of outdoors activities. Really, that's what this is comprising. And so then it makes you then drill down to say, well, what is Dubuque's fun economy, or what impact does that have on us? And so if you look at a global level, it really starts with people. And if you think of the baby boomer generation, the youngest of those of that generation is now retiring. And so they're going to have more time, more money, and with the introduction of AI and artificial intelligence, it's not really impacting their day-to-day, but it is impacting their 401k. The stock market is an all-time high. People are traveling at rates higher than we've seen ever. And really with the introduction of work from home policies and just the flexibility, there's just more people with more time, more flexibility to do and have to have fun. Then if you look at a state level, the state is introducing and implementing tax policies that are expressly intended to put more money in people's pockets in terms of income tax reduction. However, you shake out on this politically, there is an intended view to be able to say we would like to be able to keep more of our snowbirds in Iowa for longer. And so creating tax incentives to do that, as well as doubling down and saying, hey, not even taxing retirement income. And so those two things combined, you will have more people, expressly these younger baby boomers, who will hopefully stay in Iowa longer or stay within our community longer. That, coupled with what we're benefiting from here in Dubuque County, is a record level of investment in the Field of Dreams and in Travel Iowa. So all those things from a statewide are good things and are pointing up for Schmitt Island. And then lastly here, at a local level, between the Dubuque County as well as the city of Dubuque, we have a tremendous amount, and you'll see a little later, of riverfront property available to us right here, largely within Dubuque. And then we are moving forward with equitable development. In many other communities, you might call this, kind of developer friendly. I think here, we're not only developer friendly, but we're also moving forward with development equitably. And you take something like the Raise Grant. We are investing in Elm Street within our north end, but we're also investing in the old PAC site. We're also investing to make sure that people can get over to see the nature and to see Schmitt Island. And so that type of well-rounded development is going to go and do great things for our community. But alas, and self-admittedly, the financial incentive that is embedded within our DRA management structure, meaning us being one of two nonprofit casinos in America, having 1/3 of now the profits of which going towards Schmitt Island. All these things combined for us to be able to take advantage of this great natural resource. And so having an alignment economically with not only with the city, but within our community, all these things point into a great place for us within the city of Dubuque, within the county, as well as Schmitt Island. So I want to just kind of outline kind of what we have, what we've done, and then what we need. So what we have 3.42 miles of prime riverfront property. We have an extremely supportive city, county, state, and federal support. We have tremendous natural resources and infrastructure. Here we have clean water, we have clean air, we have great schools, low crime, lowest property tax within the state of Iowa among large cities. But we also have this nonprofit hospitality management structure. And so to put it in a word, we have momentum. So what have we done? Well, we've launched, with your support, $83 million in private development. This body, in support of state and federal sources, have secured $72 million in public investment. We dedicated 1/3 of our nonprofit casino funds to Schmitt Island, and then we created this nonprofit that Marie outlined earlier. And so what we've done is we've invested in ourselves. So lastly, what do we need? So not tonight, but we look forward to final comments, final input, so that we can approve this Schmitt Island master plan. We are humbly asking for continued support from not only you, but the county and the state to keep up this momentum within the island. But more broadly, and really to the people within our community, we will now need philanthropic support for our conservation and public amenities that are on the island. And so great things like a boathouse that you'll see here. If we want this to happen, we need philanthropic support to make it to happen. There are things that are outlined here that are really beautiful amenities, but unless we band together, some of these things won't pencil. Some of these things won't make sense to go to ask people broadly. They're philanthropic initiatives, but what we now have, we have a plan. And so whether that's big or small, we are going to need philanthropic support. And lastly, what is so exciting, and this is where we're going to spend the bulk of our time with Ryan here in a minute from RDG, is that we need private investment above and beyond what the DRA or Q Casino or other people who are active on the island today. We need other people from in the community and outside the community to come and invest in Dubuque. Period. End of statement. We need it at the resort. We need it in a sports complex. We need it in a mixed-use marina. And so what we are building is building confidence that we can implement a plan that has your blessing so that we can go forward and galvanize support from all the various sources so that we can move forward. And with that, thunderstorm warning. Okay, so don't run to my car. All right.
Everybody duck and cover.
But that's it. You never can tell. No snow, though. No snow. With that, I want to personally thank and acknowledge Ryan. We've gotten to know each other in the foxhole, it seems like, over the last couple of years. You've been working on a number of different things, and so we are truly indebted that we have someone who's not only a consultant helping us, but truly cares about the community. And I'd like to turn it over to Ryan from RDG. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Really appreciate the introduction, and just wanted to say thanks to all of you, mayor and council members, city administrators, the city staff behind us here who have contributed to this effort, as Jill said, for the last about 18 months or so. And tonight, we're going to run through some of the highlights of the development plan. There's a full-on document that is in final draft format that is for review and comment. And so we look forward to hearing from you and incorporating your comments into this development plan. You can see the partners here on the screen. There's a number of other consulting partners that are not represented here tonight, but were certainly represented, and their work is seen in this document. Would like to acknowledge AECOM, Strand, and Impact 7G. AECOM in large part is behind the financials, the economic model that you'll see represented here. Strand Associates, when it comes to doing work within the floodplain, in the floodway, from a regulatory standpoint, has been a great partner on all of that. And then lastly, Impact 7G, who has looked at all of the natural areas on the island to help us understand what could be if we were to take a restoration approach to beautify and enhance the island itself. In the document, you'll see, when you get to read it, an executive summary that captures the work to date at a very high level. We're going to talk tonight a little bit about the background and where we've been. We'll then walk through the development plan itself, share a little bit about how we got there from a market standpoint, the economic feasibility, some highlights from an ecological, floodplain standpoint, and then lastly, some of the work we've done from an infrastructure and prioritization standpoint. So starting with the background and the momentum, I think Alex and Jill and Marie already outlined a lot of what is happening here, so I'm not going to repeat that. But I do want to make a key point that as part of our vision, which is Dubuque's gateway to entertainment in the Mississippi, we are really looking to improve that front door, to beautify the island, and to attract new development. And so we've been really testing these financial and market models to look at is there an investable project on the island? Will there be the support from the private sector? And before we even got there, we did reach out to the private sector and asked, what would you see happening here? In a large part, destination development with a mix of uses was the feedback we received. Also want to acknowledge that we are closely looking at your goals and priorities, and you can see how we've addressed that here. I'm not going to read each of those, but again, going back to creating a vibrant community. And so what we want is people to come here that are from out of town, but also make sure that every improvement we do is for those who live in town. And so it's not a either or, it's a how can we layer the benefits for all? And so creating that vibrant community. In 2014, there were a number of recommendations that came out of that master plan. And one of those that I would like to call your attention to is, we'll call your attention to three of them. Option one, which is on the southern end of the island, that master plan was contemplating development initiatives for the peninsula that looks south and to the east over to Wisconsin and into Illinois. At that point in time, residential made sense there, supported by additional village improvements. And you can also see that they were looking at an expanded recreational opportunity next to the ice center. There was also a number of uses considered for the existing ball field site that included destination retail, potentially a minor league baseball stadium. And throughout the process that we went through, Jill mentioned COVID has happened, interest rates have changed. We also went through and looked at the boards to determine what is the right mix of improvements here that would be supported by the market. And just to kind of jump ahead, we'll talk about it here in one of the later chapters, but we really determined that, the days of destination retail like Bass Pro Shops or any other, Cabela's or large-scale things that you're going to make or you're going to develop and then drive to that and spend a few hours, really, those days are not here anymore. And so that's not necessarily an appropriate use. We also didn't, want to compete with some of the various baseball initiatives throughout the region, which really led us when we looked at the market to housing. So we'll touch base on that here in a minute. But generally speaking, a lot of the improvements on the north side, the initial idea of an island resort, those have continued to find their way into this new redevelopment plan.
Hey, Ryan, let's pause for a quick second. You're doing a great job with all the stuff that's going on around here because there's a lot happening. So I really appreciate that, Ryan. But I just want to stop. I know Mike's getting an update from our police officers, and I want to make sure everybody in the room knows that we're not just like ignoring what's going on with the storms outside. We're paying close attention to it. So Mike, do you have an update for us just to let us know what's happening?
Sure, thank you. So they have a report of winds between 70 and 100 miles an hour in New Vienna. And our policy is if the winds are 70 or above, we blow the sirens. So they blew the sirens. And so the fire chief has said she'll keep me updated by text as that moves east. And so there will come a point in time where we need to leave this room. But right now it's in New Vienna, and we just looked at the radar, and you can see where the line is in the far western part of the county.
Yep.
So for right now, I think we're okay, but within the next, I don't know how many minutes, 5, 10, 15, we'll be having to adjourn the meeting.
Okay. You want to give us a heads up on where we go when we do that, just so everybody knows, because we got the whole room.
So initially, we can just go back here in the hallway, and they're going to be observing out the window. If they think if it's more treacherous than that, then we'll take the stairway to the lower level.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. Just want to make sure everybody knew that, just because it's kind of hard to sit here and listen to sirens outside while we're trying to just listen to a presentation that's going very well, by the way. So thank you, Ryan. I appreciate that.
Sometimes I get tunnel vision and block out all the noise.
Make sure we get to the marine economics.
All right, so in 2017, we looked at the island as a whole and developed a placemaking strategy, which was really focused on public realm improvements. Coming out of this, the idea of an improved Veterans Memorial and then also an amphitheater, one of the two highlights. Both of those projects have either been completed or are in development, so it's encouraging to see that. The RAISE grant, we already talked about that. That'll really improve the front door as you come from Dubuque into the island. And, really applaud the community and the efforts that have gone into that, as that'll have a big impact on Schmitt Island, but also Dubuque as a whole. When we think about Schmitt Island, I would like to point out that we're not thinking about it as only Schmitt Island. What's good for Schmitt Island is good for Dubuque. What's good for Dubuque is good for Schmitt Island. And so we think about the riverfront as a system of improvements. And so the north end being Schmitt Island, we want to look for ways to connect that by, whether it be by water, by trail, by promenade, or by vehicle. All of those are important ways in which we move around our community. So diving into the proposed development plan, there's a number of things here that you'll see on the next couple of pages, but we really wanted to make sure that we focus on the island's brand, creating a sense of place, working towards that vision, the mission of the island, and making sure that it's unique, that it is a destination for all, that it is memorable, and that in the end, that we are all working towards an improved island that you are all proud of as you come across the bridge from Wisconsin to Iowa, or you come across the bridge from Iowa or from Dubuque onto the island. Both of those are signature gateways, and this is a really beautiful, a fairly large island overall within the Mississippi River system. So as we zoom in on the north half, I'm not going to spend a ton of time here. A number of improvements. You can see the amphitheater project here, taking advantage of the waterfront Heron Pond. We talked about a potential boathouse, looking at a couple of locations here with numbers 8 and 9, planning ahead and continuing this idea of a second pedestrian access to the island with the Piazza Channel Bridge, and then a signature boardwalk here behind Miller Riverview Park Campground. On the south side, and we'll dig into this here in a bit with the economics, but really what we're looking at here is a slate of improvements that, number one, would really reactivate the island and create this destination. So expanding the ice center with a second sheet of ice, not necessarily duplicating, but just having, a space for tournament hockey, having opportunities for improved practice times to reduce that burden. We don't need people staying up until 1 in the morning to potentially practice, or even if it's 10 o'clock. And so we see there being a real demand there, but that will be further evaluated as one of the action items coming out of this. Secondly, what is the highest and best use of the real estate we have here? We're showing one of 3 ideas that have been contemplated. This looks at putting in a 150 unit in terms of apartment complex that would be on newly developed ground that would be raised out of the floodplain, or in partnership with the developer elevated above the floodplain. Lastly, I mentioned places for all, so looking at an iconic river-themed destination play, and then a hotel that would support the activities at the ice center. We are further evaluating what is the highest and best use of the sports complex. We've heard from multiple parties, but we're going to be taking a deeper dive into that at a later date here that will really look at what is out there and from a market standpoint, and what could we support. And then lastly, I just wanted to call your attention to public fishing opportunities here on 16th Street as the river narrows, or the Piazza Channel narrows down. There's great fishing opportunities, and then looking at ways in which we can get people better connected to the river by way of overlooks or council rings, similar to like what you would find up at Eagle Point Park on the higher portions of the floodplain. Believe it or not, the landfill debris do extend out into this way, so there is elevated ground there. So this is the view of what we're proposing looking east if you were hovering above the 16th Street Bridge. And you can see in the foreground a revised marina operations that would be bounded by a hotel, a 4-story hotel to the north, the expanded ice center right here, and then the apartment complex over here. Some have asked us, is it apartments or is it condos? And I think if you were a developer and if you do good development, we don't want just any old development. We want it to be unique and of the level that is fitting for being on the river. You have iconic river destination buildings like the River Center, and those are beautiful. So we want to make sure that we're purposeful and we're conscious of what types of developments come forward. But I would say we would let the market and the development community make that final decision. Right now, we're basing it on apartments, but we would encourage you to keep that open. This is a view that looks at what that riverfront destination playground could be. That would be for all ages, whether, a lot of times you'll see playgrounds that are for, elementary school ages. We're trying to look at play for all ages. And so having play for teens, for families, for adults, and having a place where all are welcome and it's accessible for all. So then I'm going to go through the development systems here to get to the economics, hopefully before the New Vienna storm hits us. But we have looked closely at parking on the island. Does the supply meet the demand? With some of the improvements we're making, there's a slight reduction, but you've likely heard from Walker Parking on some other initiatives. Walker Parking has looked at the supply versus demand here, and generally speaking, as long as you don't have a concert and an ice hockey event at the same time, there is enough parking on the island to support those primary activities. There might be a very, very, very rare occasion where we need to look at some improvements in parking efficiency, but those would be the unique situations. Most of the time, there is ample parking. Again, reminding you that we're on the river in the floodplain, that we're working over a landfill, and so when you consider pro forma costs, we have to make sure we consider that we have some geotechnical or environmental considerations to work with. And then the mobility systems, whether it be by water with water taxi, shuttle stops, riverfront promenades, all of those are outlined here. And then the roadways that help move you around. And what this does is it helps to communicate to the prospective developers or the private community what moves we're making to make this development more connected, so that you can drive here, park your car, and spend the entire weekend on the island without driving again. Maybe you would bike around. There could be the bike share, scooter share potentially, all of those things that are out there that may be advantageous to promote entertainment across the weekend. Looking at the natural areas, we mentioned that already. And so now, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this because I think in one of our prior work sessions, we walked you through all of the program details. And so just to refresh your memory, we looked at the apartments and we looked at the ice center. And what this means is that, we're not just drawing boxes on a plan, we're actually programming out these buildings so that we know how much they cost and then what uses they will serve. And I think that's the difference between some of the prior plans where we looked at, the footprint, but not necessarily the gross square footage or the net square footages that are essential to understand, does this project actually attract or serve the needs of what we're suggesting it does, or can we fit it in this space? Some of the other examples, we talked about a boathouse, environmental learning center. So now to the market and economic baseline. This is where Chris Brewer, who you heard from earlier this year, led the effort on behalf of ACOM within our team. We looked at the greater region. One of the key things to note here is that the length of, or the visitor volumes, you can see Schmitt Island here and where it stacks up compared to Galena, the Millwork District, downtown Dubuque, or the Port of Dubuque. So of those five, we're actually the lowest. But one of the things I think that you have to celebrate about Schmitt Island is the length of stay. So second to downtown Dubuque, people average about 20%, 22% of the visitors average more than 150 minutes on Schmitt Island. So you have a captive audience, which tells us that that destination perspective is validated by way of this data. And then when we look at the market and economic baseline, whether it was, when we started this project, we were keeping a flexible approach. We didn't know if residential would be the right direction to go. So we looked at industrial, we looked at retail, we looked at office and residential. You can see here that, industrial really doesn't complement the land uses. You have a fair amount of industrial real estate that is available and ready. Should we keep going or?
Yeah, please, for now, yeah.
And from a retail standpoint, we already talked about that and what the opportunity is there. It's coming back, but within Dubuque, there's still plenty of opportunities to fill storefronts. And then from an office standpoint, again, not necessarily a huge market there, but we do know that there are significant housing challenges, and we're looking at addressing those challenges across all income levels. And so we did look at that, and then we started to look at various other communities. So whether it's Eau Claire, Wisconsin, Cedar Rapids, Iowa, Davenport, Iowa, to look at what the square foot rents would be. And if you were to look at similar developments in those communities, what could we draw from them? We also did validate this by way of conversation with local developers here in the Millwork District to understand what they're getting per square foot. I will say that in 2023 dollars at $260, $270 per square foot, that's pretty high. But as you look at the cost of construction on Schmitt Island, we need to have rents that will pay for that cost of construction over the long term. And so you will see a slightly elevated cost per square foot, but that comes with amenities and that comes with that destination appeal. So from a feasibility standpoint, just one perspective on does this work economically. And we're at a high level going to summarize this. We looked at three different scenarios. Number one is, and again, we're talking about the marina down here in this area. So there's about 19 acres or so that the city currently leases. And then we zoomed in on the residential aspect of this peninsula as a snapshot, as a basis of developing these recommendations. So we could continue with the status quo as they are, lease payments to the cities, very little property tax. We could improve that by way of residential development, which is scenario 2, and that would bring about an improved tax payments to the city and an improved lease rate to the city. Or we could look at maybe a hybrid where we don't necessarily develop residential. We create an improved marina with some type of RV community within it. However, we would look to open that up to have public access all around it. So those are the three different options we looked at. And then on the next couple of slides here, we're going to look at the present value benefits as we were to compare those. So status quo, ground lease.
Yeah, before we keep going, so we are going to attempt temporarily adjourn. We'll just go into this hallway for now.
Okay.
Then if it gets dicey, then we'll go downstairs.
Sounds good. All right, so we are going to temporarily adjourn due to weather for a few moments here and hopefully be able to return. Thank you. Adrienne Ann Breitfelder, City Clerk, you are hereby directed to call a special session of the City Council to be held on Monday, August 5th, 2024 at 5:30 PM in the historic Federal Building for the purpose of conducting work sessions on Schmitt Island Redevelopment Plan and Four Mounds Foundation.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to a special session of the Dubuque City Council for August 5th, 2024. As a reminder to viewers and listeners, due to the nature of tonight's meeting topic, public input is not accepted. However, you may contact the City Council directly from the city's webpage at www.cityofdubuque.org/council contacts. Attendance for the session is as follows. Mayor Kavanaugh.
Here.
Council members Farber.
Here.
Jones.
Here.
Resnick.
Here.
Roussel.
Here.
Sprank.
Here.
Wethel.
Here.
City Manager Van Milligan.
Here.
And City Attorney Brumwell.
Here.
Thank you. Our first work session is the Schmitt Island Redevelopment Plan. I will turn it over to Dubuque Racing Association President and CEO Alex Dixon.
Good evening, everyone. I'll be brief to make sure that we are able to get all of this here tonight. Again, my name is Alex Dixon, humbly serve as the President and CEO at Q Casino Resort and DRA. So excited to be back before you. We are going to finish up the work session. You've seen this a number of times, but I think a couple caveats I want to just reiterate. Number one, the partnership between the DRA and the City of Dubuque to bring forth Schmitt Island development literally could not be any better. We've got a number of our colleagues who run city agencies behind us that we won't run through, but we literally across about 15 different projects are moving forward on a weekly basis, project management moving forward, and it has yielded tremendous benefits, whether it is the $50+ million raise grant that we were able to secure, or the other private public-private partnerships that you're going to talk about, that we'll talk about here tonight. Just couldn't be any better. So again, we humbly ask for you to continue to make this a high priority so that we can continue on with this partnership. And specifically, we'd like you to review these elements of this work session tonight so that we can come back before you for a formal adoption of this development plan to be able to move forward. But one thing I'd leave with you is this page right here as Ryan comes up. As we look on the page, this shows the 3.42 miles of shoreline that the city of Dubuque controls and owns. And so what we're talking about Schmitt Island here is a broader part about what we are going to do with the waterfront here within Dubuque. And so this body, the 7 of you city council people, along with staff, are really going to help charge us to help not only move forward Chaplain Schmitt Island, but really communicate to the public sector as well as the private sector as to what you want. And so this discussion tonight really helps to indicate what are the policy considerations that you're willing to take upon, and then what you want from the private sector and where you want them to invest. And so as you engage on this activity, it's really to help provide momentum to make sure that the things that you and the people of Dubuque want to happen on the riverfront do. And so with that, would like to bring up Ryan Peterson from RDG to help us walk through the remaining of the analysis. Thank you.
All right, good evening. Thank you, Alex, and it's great to be back here. Hopefully the storms hold off. So we're going to spend about 2 minutes recapping where we were last time, and for those members in the audience who may not have joined us during that evening, and then we're going to dive right into the economics and then talk a little bit about next steps. So with that, I think this diagram here, as Alex said, starts to show the big picture and the context that we are working within. Schmitt Island really does anchor the north end of Dubuque, at least along the riverfront, and it serves as your gateway as you come into the community. Last time we talked a little bit about the master plan. This shows the context here. So north of Highway 151 in large part is the resort development. You can see the amphitheater starting to take place there and how that fits into the landscape. And then on the south side, where we'll spend the majority of our discussion here as it relates to the economics with the marina. A couple things to note, and I would just illustrate here, is that the amphitheater, and we'll be back in front of you at a future date, is really starting to take shape and continues to really beautify and enhance the island there, and the way that it is buffered by landforms to help quiet the sound and a dispersion and so forth. So great momentum happening there. And then when we flip to the south side, you start to see this exhibit, which outlines, and I'll call your attention in particular to Keynote 7, which is one of the proposed scenarios, and you'll see 3 of them that we've been studying the economics for, which includes an apartment development. And then Keynote 2, which is the ICE Center, and we're looking at an expansion of that, which would then be connected by a potential future hotel development. All of that would be anchored by public realm improvements, which are parks, places to fish, trails, river walks, places for all of citizens, whether or not you could potentially live here one day, or you are just visiting, or you live somewhere else within the region. So looking to have a layered approach to make sure that what we do here is for all, since this is an entirely owned island, an island entirely owned by the city. This illustration right here starts to show what could be one of the potential scenarios, as if you were hovering above 16th Street looking east, and in the background you can start to see the Highway 151 bridge here. Alex mentioned the RAISE grant that you've been awarded, and one of the very conceptual improvements of a roundabout shown there, but then ultimately starting to see some of the development that could take place out on the peninsula that has tremendous views as you look east and south. As we zoom in here, this would be one of the potential opportunities for creating a destination playground for all ages and all abilities, looking at an opportunity for those not just that are in elementary school, but teens, adults, no matter what your age is and your mobility, finding a way to create an engaging experience. A potential hotel that I mentioned that would connect to an expanded ICE center, along with the proposed, one of the proposed development scenarios, which looks at apartments that could be here. I think I noted last time that there's been a discussion about apartments versus condos. I think that really would be a market-driven decision that would come down to the developer, and likely through the development agreement that should you support this would kind of work its way out through that. So. As we all know, the market literally is changing every day, and so we're trying to make sure we prescribe a vision that is supported and maintains a sense of place and continuity, but also some flexibility. As we know, this plan will be likely implemented over a series of 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Real quick, these are the development systems, so we aren't looking at this in just the silo. We do consider certainly the parking within the island, and so this is looking at a demand study to see if we have enough parking to support the proposed uses. In large part, this work was completed by Walker Parking as part of their collaboration with the city on another project, but we did connect with them through the duration of this project to make sure that we had enough parking specifically during those event-based scenarios. Secondly, the floodway, floodplain, being mindful of the various federal agencies that have jurisdiction here, and so being respectful of that, and also being mindful of the environmental constraints that brings about, and also the opportunities. And so just noting that. I think I've mentioned this before, the landfill, that would not be an island if it wasn't for a landfill that you could develop. So what comes with the good, you also get a little bit of the bad. So we're working through that, but generally speaking, the area in orange is area that was once used for those landfill operations. And then mobility. We've talked a little bit about that already, and I noted that in some of the earlier discussions about the promenades that would currently this land down here is in private management, and so therefore you cannot walk out there unless you are somebody that leases space there. But with the proposed scenarios in the future, regardless of what option, we are proposing that you would open up portions of that to have continuous riverfront access as much as we possibly can. We looked at the development systems from a roadway standpoint, from a roundabout standpoint, from a drive, and then also some of the environmental considerations. On a latter slide, we'll show you the ecological aspects. This looks more at the regulatory or restrictions on the island, and so noting that there are potential wetlands out there, areas where there's been wetland mitigation completed, and then also land and water conservation funding, which was used to develop the McLeese Sports Complex. So with that, some of the program details, this was presented to you as part of a prior work session. I just want to point out that the costs and the size of these buildings and these facilities based on the market factors, but then also in order to understand what something costs, you really have to have a decent understanding of the square footage of that facility and does it fit? Is this a viable development? And our goal here is to provide the DRA and the community with a plan that has been vetted, that we've completed that due diligence, that sometimes would be left up to the private sector to figure out. And when development opportunities are plentiful, sometimes you have to go the extra mile and do that work for the private sector. The ice center, we talked a little bit about that and what that could mean with a second sheet of ice, fishing access and so forth, and then an environmental and recreation outpost could double as a boathouse, various opportunities for development on the river and getting people to engage with it and connect to it. So with that, we're going to dive into the market and economic baseline. Last time we talked a little bit about the various potential uses on the island. In large part, this was driven by the greater regional context of the Dubuque area. We did look at residential, we looked at retail, we looked at industrial, we looked at office. We wanted to understand what the trends were, what it was looking like coming out of COVID. The long and short of it is that the days of destination retail, malls or Bass Pro Shops, things like that, that's really not what's happening right now. More boutique style retail is certainly what the market is suggesting, and with that, also being mindful of the greater Dubuque region, there are ample opportunities for retail within the community, and so it wasn't one of the things that rose to the top as being a primary driver, probably a complementary driver. Office, we're not seeing a ton of demand for that right now, and I should note the partnership that RDG and ACOM, who was the economic consultant to work on this, took a deep dive into that, as well as industrial. You have these markets covered within your community, and when we think about the adjacencies within the island, didn't feel as though those would complement the vision that was established in 2014. And so to further that 2014 vision, we took a deeper dive into several scenarios, and I think tonight, Alex said it well, we're here to present to you some opportunities and some options, so that as this plan moves forward, we have these different scenarios to look at, and ultimately, as policymakers, you can help determine in the future when proposed scenarios come forth, how you want to manage that. So 3 scenarios that we studied, primarily for what we'll call the peninsula down here. One of the first scenario was what happens if we continue to operate this in the same fashion that we have, so status quo. Scenario 2 is what happens if we were to rethink this peninsula and look at adding in some residential development. And then the third option was a little bit of a hybrid where we would have public access around the peninsula, make it accessible, but also potentially continue to serve some of the RV opportunities that there is demand for. And so these 3 options all present a different yield. The first status quo option, we looked at this over a 75-year, the net present value of what that might be, and calculated that out based on these various options. And so status quo versus the improved residential. So on the right here, I know it's very hard to see, but on the right, we're looking at what it would look like for ground lease payment and property taxes over a 75-year period, comparing that to what it would look like if you were to develop residential and have a ground lease payment and property taxes over a 75-year period. So the status quo would be looking at $790,000 of ground lease payments plus property taxes of approximately $80,000 versus $2.7 million of ground lease payments over 75 years and another $22 million in property taxes over 75 years. So they do have a different, significant difference in return, and ultimately, as I mentioned earlier, it's up to this group here to think about, what makes the most sense within the context of your community, ultimately within the context of developing Schmitt Island. We also looked at the different benefits of the hybrid scenario where we may have some improvements completed there. You have a slightly better return, about double that of what you would do if you have status quo, so you would see an uptick there. But ultimately, you can see the three scenarios summarized here with combining the values of both the lease payments and property taxes in the 75-year period, and looking at about $870,000 for status quo, $1.5 million if you were to do the improved RV offerings and whatnot, and then about $25 million if you were to look at, a new development altogether. And both the improved marina and the improved residential, the public community would also gain access in and around that area. So I'm going to kind of wrap up through the next chapters here, and then we'll look forward to your questions. Ecological, we've already mentioned this, but just wanted to pay special attention. We worked with Impact 7G and their ecology team to go out and study the island, and so making sure that what we do here is mindful of that. And then I already mentioned the improvements within, or evaluating the floodplain, so don't need to repeat that. We have worked with the departments within the City Hall, both engineering, and then some of the outside agencies, whether it be Alliant Energy and so forth, to look at utility, infrastructure, and access. And then lastly, developed a prioritized costs and recommendation with an action plan. And I think during our earlier work sessions, we came before you and discussed, updating the ordinance that exists today to allow for residential, looking at developing a value matrix when it comes to determining what is the highest and best use as it relates to you, and when a 75-year lease might be warranted versus when is it okay to do a 25-year lease. And I think that's an action item that can be completed with city staff. And then, continuing to look at understanding the restrictions on the ball field site, working to potentially establish an RFI to seek out private interest, and then look at some of the geotechnical and environmental considerations on that peninsula to better understand what we are working with out there. And then lastly is looking at, what is the highest and best use of that sports site with the McAleese Park there and the Ice Center, and really doing a feasibility into that. I know that a number of these in our collaborations with city staff are ongoing and underway, so it's exciting to see that some of these steps are already been put in motion to help us understand where we can go from here. But I think all in all, in conclusion, it's been a great partnership with the staff, with the DRA and you, and we look forward to hearing your questions.
Well, Ryan, thank you very much for being here again to be able to continue this conversation and share the rest of the information with us. We really do appreciate that. All right, open it up for questions. Yeah,
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. So many great things that you've mentioned and we can read about, and it's a great plan so far, and I'm glad we're working on it. I was also happy to hear you mention the RVs are included, mentioned the RV crowd, and maybe you're talking about Miller Riverview Park and campground. I don't know if you talk about that specifically, but to me, there's such a wonderful Veterans Memorial on the island, and that's two sides of a coin to me, because I read an RV park study, and they had 15% of the RV crowd is either veterans or active duty folks, and that's double the population in just the regular population here in the United States. So a lot of veterans, a lot of active duty people are in that, are part of the folks that are using Miller Riverview Park and Campground. So, and I think, again, that's a great way to honor our veterans is by keeping that facility open. And I don't know what, long-term is over this next 75 years. But that's one of the questions you're still looking at, right? What is the role of that side of the island? What are you going to be doing?
I think it's a great point, and I think first to talk about the people who are here, and I think first and foremost, there are people who utilize both the Miller Riverview Park as well as the marina space. And in many cases, they're good customers because they are over at the marina. They also come over to Houlihan's because I've seen them and met them and talked to them. And so I think within this is that it's important that we recognize a lot of the other components of the development plan we've done to this point has been taking underutilized or not utilized space and bringing new things. So we're building a hotel on what was a hallway. We're building an amphitheater on what was dog kennels, right? What we're now moving into is that there will be people, let's say, impacted by some of the policy changes, policy choices that we in fact make. What is great and what you note is that there is Miller Riverview Park. That is a place where there's two places that people RV on the island. One is in the floodplain or within the floodplain. And so there's some options that we have, but like all things, it takes money in order to be able to make improvements within a specific area. And so we have not figured out exactly what are the long-term improvements to the Miller Riverview Park. What is great is as a part of the amphitheater, there will be some improvements at a minimum to the entrance, as well as some of the other areas within there. Now that we have this Schmitt Island development, 1/3 of the profits, we have a mechanism to be able to help advance some of those. But part of this is we need to be able to figure out what are the policy considerations, particularly on the marina site, which, as you can see, has the potential for significant economic value to the entire community of Dubuque. And what we want to be able to do is to recognize those people that utilize this service today. There are businesses who operate today on that very site. We're cognizant, we want to listen, we want to be good not only neighbors, but help to enact the vision that you in fact describe. And so we don't have everything figured out today, but today is an important start at a minimum to understand what are the economics associated with the various options that we're presenting.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Time for one or two more questions, probably. Ms. Wethel.
Just while we're talking about the amphitheater, I know this is more tonight about the marina site, but I had a constituent ask me questions about the amphitheater as it relates to sound. And so I don't know that there's a question involved in this, but I actually had requested some information beforehand and got great information back from engineering, so thank you. But some of the details that were offered to me as far as different sound barriers would include acoustic panels, natural barriers, and sound baffles. Stage orientation and positioning are being considered as it relates to sound. And then soundproof tents and enclosures, such as enclosing stage at certain areas potentially, or partial enclosures. And then sound absorbing ground cover, so talking about different turfs and landscaping that might absorb sound. So I wanted to throw that out there and see if there was anything else anyone had to offer on that.
I think as a result of time, I want to thank Nate who put together that response, and I think this is the way things work. We're having a public session, there's public input, you pass along that input to us. Nate put together the response, specifically what you described, and I don't think there's anything else, but Nate, anything else that you'd want to offer?
Nate Steffen, civil engineer. Just a little background. So currently the backwater stage operates in a kind of an open parking lot, and it operates under the city's noise ordinance, which is Sunday through Thursday. They can play amplified music until 10 p.m. And then Friday night and Saturday night, they can play until midnight. So, and then part of what the tent and all that is would be the canopy on top of the amphitheater, and kind of also directing that sound kind of down and kind of capturing some of it. And then the placement, the design team is also going to look at kind of specific placement of trees to help absorb some of the sound as well. So.
And Nate, I just want to thank you because there's a lot more detail in what you gathered, and I just want folks at home to know that we're listening to those concerns, and I think we've got a lot of options, not just for sound related to the amphitheater, but no matter what we decide to do with the other spaces on the island. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, and on that note, we are pushing up on the next work session here, but on the note of public input and the way that we can gather more information from folks, this is the beginning of this conversation in many ways. Not the very, very beginning, but the beginning of sort of the next phase of this conversation. What is going to happen with this island at the certain places that we're talking about now? You already mentioned, Alex, and Ryan, you pointed this out too. There are some things that are very much in the works already. They're happening. So the amphitheater's happening, hotels happening, all this stuff is going on. But we are starting to talk about the southern portion of the island more, and that's kind of where this conversation is headed. So in the future, what we have is for us as a council to start to provide more direction of what is going to happen on this part of the island and on the rest of the island in general. And we have a couple of opportunities coming up for that. One, we have our goal-setting session that happens this month. I'm kind of thinking this will be at least a topic of conversation, and we'll see how it fits with the rest of the goals and priorities we have. But at the same time, whether or not certain aspects of this make it into goals and priorities, these things are already in the works, and we'll be having some of these discussions going forward. So I just hope that the rest of the public recognizes that we will definitely be talking more about this in the very near future. So thank you very much for being here, like I said, yet again, to be able to provide more information. We will have more questions. I'm sure the public will have more questions, so we'll be sending those your way and looking forward to future conversations. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.